and the truth is that yes, Israel went into Gaza in this latest round of violence to protect its borders from what was a murderous campaign that Hamas waged on October the 7th. However, there is a broader context, which is that for 20 years, the international community has basically turned a blind eye to this conflict and ignored it. And, at our peril have we ignored it, because now, there is a real chance that this becomes a much broader regional conflict that it affects not just the Middle East, but the rest of the world.
Director and founder of Yachad. It's a British Jewish organisation whose mission really is to empower British Jews to support a political resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Hannah's on the line. Hannah, good morning.
Hi, Rosie. Thanks for having me on.
What do you think of that analysis that we've seen sort of extremely robust action from Israel at this point, but it's a bit unclear as to what their long-term strategy is?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because also Anthony Blinken raised that issue over the weekend, which is that there doesn't appear to be any kind of exit strategy now. So how Israel extracts itself from the military campaign it's waging and what happens basically the day after when it's no longer fighting in the Gaza Strip, there doesn't seem to be a plan. And Angela is correct that Netanyahu is trying to score a military victory. It's not very clear whether he can. I think that the big thing that the people of Israel are waiting for is the hostages to come home. And there is talk now of the possibility of ceasefire in which the hostages would be returned, and some kind of debate growing around whether that can be achieved. So a ceasefire and return for the hostages, in which order that would happen. But given he went in with the intention of making it impossible for Hamas to ever rule the Gaza Strip again and to remove them from power completely, it seems to be that the discourse around that is shifting. And if it is shifting, then I think it really begs the question as to, what's the point of this military campaign and what is it actually going to achieve? And the thing that nobody is talking about is the day after. So who rules the Gaza Strip? How does Israel protect its borders? What's the political process? At the moment, we're in this debate of it's either a ceasefire or Israel carries on, but nobody is discussing the possibility of a political process that would result in safety and security, basically, which is what we really need.
How likely is it, do you think, that type of conversation does start to happen?
I'm not sure. I think it will depend on international pressure and the extent to which actually international pressure can be brought to bear, not actually on Israel, but on allies. So on America, on the EU, on Arab states, particularly the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia, which is that in order for there to be a political process, my view is increasingly is that has to be imposed with impose is not the right word, but it has to be instigated by external parties. And at the moment, external parties are doing a lot of work to try and stop this conflict from spilling over. But there doesn't appear to be very much work going on as to kind of what is the process to get these parties around the table. And the truth is that yes, Israel went into Gaza in this latest round of violence to protect its borders from what was a murderous campaign that Hamas waged on October the 7th. However, there is a broader context, which is that for 20 years, the international community has basically turned a blind eye to this conflict and ignored it. And, at our peril have we ignored it, because now, there is a real chance that this becomes a much broader regional conflict that it affects not just the Middle East, but the rest of the world. And so, what I would like to see is the international community already putting plans in place to say, well, what's the political process that will not just end this round of violence, but will, for once and for all, bring this conflict to an end. Everybody knows broadly what those parameters are, what it will look like. It is two states for two people, in which the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are Palestinian state, and a safe and secure Israel side by side. For 20 years, nobody's tried to get the two parties to reach that agreement. And now I think there really is no choice.
When you say nobody, or you talk about the international community, presumably you're talking about, in the main, the US.
Yes, it's mainly the US, but I think increasingly the Arab world has a really significant role to play here. And the truth is that the US is no longer, I don't think, seen to be by the Palestinian people, and I obviously cannot speak on their behalf, but an honest broker, which is that from what I read and I see and I hear from partners, is that the US is seen to be funding a war which the Palestinian people certainly do not support, and I'm not sure the US will be forgiven by them for doing it and for doing what they perceive to be giving Israel a blank check to fight that war. Whether that's the case or not, is a kind of subject of a different conversation, but. Unless there are Arab partners that come in to make that process happen, I think that it's unlikely to be successful.
Final thing, Hannah. Politically, how vulnerable a position is Benjamin Netanyahu in? Because what is the support looking like for him, first of all, internationally, but then also just from within inside Israel?
Well, look, I think that his days are really numbered. So he was already, for those who've been following kind of the internal politics of Israel, he was overseeing a very bad period of significant political instability in Israel, which he was seen to be the mastermind of. And the one thing that Bibi Netanyahu has always said is his thing is that he is Mr. Security. So he is the man that will guarantee Israel's safety and security. And on his watch has been the largest massacre of Israelis and Jews since the Holocaust. So he no longer has the one thing which he claimed has defined him from everyone else. I cannot see a scenario, and he might survive the war, but there is no scenario, I think, in which he survives beyond the war. So his days are numbered, and I think that can't be viewed in isolation from how this war is conducted, which is that he needs to score some kind of significant military victory so he can claim that he did everything in his power, and because of him he has re-established safety for Israel. I think increasingly, from what people are saying and from what Anshel has said, written today, it's very much the case that people are no longer assured that he can even do that. So I think that his national legitimacy is at an all-time low, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think his international legitimacy was prior to this war at an all-time low. And I think now he will, when the dust has settled on this kind of terrible round of violence, I think he's going to have very few allies and friends abroad either.